Welcome to Lyft. Seriously, thank you so much for coming out. We are incredibly excited to be hosting our first ever design-focused event here at HQ, and we're just really excited to be here. So thank you for being here. We have my name is Frank Yu. I'm the director of product design here at Lyft. And we have some great content for you, as well as an amazing lineup of speakers. Of course, we have the guys from Pixate. So just really happy that you could be here with us. By the way, you sold out this event in less than 2 hours from when it was posted, which is like amazing. But I think that speaks to the importance of prototyping as a tool in the designer's toolbox today. And so we're kind of at this inflection point, right, with regards to our process and our tools. And so I'm excited about it. I hope you guys are excited about it. So tonight's going to be a lot of fun. To get us started, our very own Patrick Wong and Mark Howman are going to walk you through prototyping and process integration, as well as a case study that's going to showcase the power of prototyping, not just as a design tool, but also as a communications tool. Just a little bit more about Patrick and Mark. Patrick is a senior product designer here at Lyft. He's worked on many parts of the product, including the split pay feature, which hopefully some of you are familiar with. In his spare time, he's also learning Swift for iOS. This dude's going to be a double, triple threat very soon. And he's actually shipped his first app to the App Store. It's called Tipsy. It's awesome. You should check it out. And so we're really lucky to have him. Mark Howman, also a senior product designer, has been with the company from day one, pretty much. He's Lyft's and Zimride's first designer, and has had a hand in pretty much the entire product, everything that you see today, including Lyft Line, both for the passenger and driver side. So really excited to have them both speaking here tonight. I'm going to introduce the Pixate guys a little bit later on. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the Pixate presentation. So we'll hold on questions just for a little bit until that is over. And let's go ahead and get started. With that, I'd like to bring Patrick Wong up on the stage. Please help me welcome Patrick. You got the con, man.
How's everyone doing? Awesome. So I'm going to talk about prototyping and design today, and specifically why prototyping is crucial for designers today. I'm going to take a look at how we integrate prototyping into our design process at Lyft, and then how you might incorporate this into your team's design process. So first, I'd like to take a look at the history of prototyping tools. Starting from the very beginning of time, Flash. How many of you guys remember Flash? Anyone? Got some dinosaurs in the room? Okay. So Flash was one of the greatest tools of its times, right? It was one of the first tools that allowed designers to create interactive, motion-based designs. So it really did a great job of introducing motion into the world of digital products. But at some point, the web kind of evolved past Flash, right? That wasn't good enough. So designers started to look for more tools that allowed for more intricate motion design, right? So you think about After Effects. That's kind of become in vogue over the recent years, right? But where After Effects falls short is it still doesn't really answer the question of what happens when you click on something, drag it, and release it, right? You can't really interact with anything in After Effects. And so the web is kind of caught up too, right? So CSS3, HTML5, jQuery. This has allowed designers to create mobile prototypes for the first time, right? So browser-based design, things that you can finally see and interact with on your actual smartphones and tablets, right? But still, it's still kind of far from the actual thing, right? So JavaScript has like performance issues on mobile. It doesn't have all the built-in transitions that native apps have. So there's got to be a better solution than that. And more recently, we've had tools like Envision and Flinto. How many of you have used this before? Okay, so most people are pretty familiar with that. So these tools kind of started to take us in the right direction, right? So now you can create full end-to-end flows that you can load on your mobile device and kind of get a feel for, how your app works, working on interaction flows. But again, it still doesn't answer that question of what happens when I click and drag on something and release it. Like nothing happens in these apps. Or what happens if I do a pinch gesture or a swipe, right? So a lot of these things are more and more important as a product designer today, specifically if you're working on mobile, and then one could also imagine these things are going to become a lot more important going forward for the web as well. And then where are we today, right? So we have tools like Form, Origami, Framer, Pixate. How many in the room use these tools? Okay, talk to our recruiters afterwards. So these tools have came onto the scene in like the last year or so alone, right? So if you think about that for a second, like these tools allow for fully interactive prototypes that work on native devices, right? And this has all happened in like the last year or so. So you can kind of imagine where we're going as a practice of design, right? So where's the future? Designers are going to start to get closer and closer to building and prototyping experiences that are almost indistinguishable from the actual end user experiences themselves, right? So that kind of changes the way that we think about design, specifically as product designers working on digital products. Crazy. So I remember the first time I saw Pixate, my mind was blown, right? Like, this was a tool that looked like Photoshop, right? But it promised completely native interactions using image-based prototypes, no code necessary. And I remember the first time I saw this, I reached out to the guys on Pixate on Twitter. I said, hey, I'd love to get on your beta. And so they invited me, and I've been using their product ever since. And for me, it's one of the best tools on the market for our jobs, because I would say about 95%, maybe 100% of the things I do on a day-to-day basis, I can prototype in Pixate. I think Pixate kind of, has this reputation of it's not for technical people, but I would argue that it's totally for technical people, right? But the beauty of Pixate is its speed. So you can probably create 5 different directions of prototypes in Pixate in the amount of time it would have taken you had you been doing it in like HTML and CSS and JavaScript, so on and so forth. And then just as a final point, like, Pixate's not paying me to say any of this stuff. They didn't pay me to use their beta, so I'm honestly just a big fan of the product, and it's really changed the way I've worked. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Pixate and also just prototyping in general as relates to our process here at Lyft. So why is this important? Hopefully I'm preaching to the choir here, but as I was saying earlier, like smartphones, gesture-based devices, like this has really opened up an entirely new world of design, right? No longer can you just sit and sketch or your Photoshop layers and move things around. Now you really have to think about motion from the very beginning, how interaction works from the very start of your design process. And this might kind of look familiar to some of you, but traditionally design teams have kind of had 3 separate practices, right? So you may have your interaction designers, you have your visual designers, your prototypers, right? Someone creates wireframes, interaction specs, information architecture, and then you hand it off to a prototyper who kind of goes in their cave for a week and works on a prototype and gets you something, and it's not quite right, so you have to send it back to him, and he goes and fixes it again. And then once all that's done, then you go and send it to your visual designer who kind of puts the polish on it. And for us at Lyft, like all these skills are actually kind of one and the same now, right? So that intersection of all 3 for us just becomes product design as we know it today, right? So when you think about your iPhone app or your Android app, you can't just only pay attention to interaction when things like motion are very important too, right? Or also the visual design is very important as well. No longer can you just have 3 separate practices. A team is far more effective when designers can just do all 3. And so next I want to talk about prototyping and how it helps with working with stakeholders. So you can imagine, right? You're a designer, you're working on a new feature, and you have this crazy idea where you tap into a field and a checkbox appears and it gets highlighted and things move around, and then you explain that to your PM or your engineer with your Photoshop or your Sketchbox, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? So the value of those things can't really be demonstrated with static mocks anymore. A lot of the apps we work with today, a lot of that isn't apparent just in a static screen. So you can imagine once those things start coming to life, you can really understand how that interaction feels. You can demonstrate the value. You can show that to your PM and they'll be like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Your engineer can look at it and say, oh yeah, I can build that in an hour, right? Wishful thinking. So I just want to give another example of this, how we've used prototyping here at Lyft. So when I was designing Lyft's split payment feature, originally the mocks just included, someone sends you a split payment, you hit accept, and a toast message just pops up and it goes away. And that's what we were going to ship, right? But then I went to bed one night and I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I'm a designer. Like that's not good enough for me, right? That's not perfect. That's not exciting. That's not sexy. So I went back to the drawing board, made like 3 different various prototypes using Pixate. Probably took me about 20 minutes. I brought it to my product design review with my PM and my engineer, and I just showed them something a lot more lightweight, but still hopefully added an element of delight and fun. And when they saw this, they were like, oh yeah, totally, we're gonna build that. And the engineer looked at it and he's like, yeah, I could build that, no problems. There were no complications, nothing. And so really, this is the power of prototyping, right? We use prototypes as artifacts too. So we don't have like, static interaction specs that say when you tap here, this thing moves in. We just give them the Pixate prototype. And both our iOS and Android developers have been able to just take this and build it very closely. So again, you're kind of thinking about your improved efficiency across teams, right? You no longer have to say, hey, could you tweak that like 2 pixels higher or make it come in a little faster? They can get it pretty close on the first time around. So tools like these are extremely powerful. And then finally, I'm going to talk about prototyping as relates to user research, right? So at Lyft, we use this tool called Look Back in conjunction with Pixate. And I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Look Back. Cool. So for those of you who don't know, Look Back is a tool that allows you to record everything that goes on in the device, so all the taps, all the gestures that occur, but also leverages the front-facing camera to record your research participants. So we'll take Pixate prototypes, load it into Look Back, and now we have this crazy research in a box, right? Like our designers can go out and do research guerrilla style with extremely high fidelity and really great output. And you can imagine, like, after you've done like 10 different user studies, now you have a collection of data. Where did these people tap? What were their reactions, right? Did they get really sad when they tapped on your interaction, or were they really delighted? And so this has been a very powerful tool for us. But we also like to think that prototypes don't just help us as designers, but they help our users as well. Because you can imagine in your traditional research setup, you have maybe a research lab, and there's a giant microphone in front of the user, and maybe there's a camera in their face. All that stuff is really distracting, right? So with this tool, we can really just put the user in the context of which we're designing for, so they can better, evaluate your design and put themselves in those scenarios that you're designing for. And this has helped us tremendously get really pointed feedback on what we're designing. And then the final point I wanted to make about user research is, now we live in a world where paper prototypes and sketching during user research can kind of fade in the background and become a thing of the past. Because with tools like Pixate, Framer, Form, you name it, whatever your medium is, you can now create tons of different variations in a very quick amount of time. You can imagine probably faster than printing out sheets of paper and cutting it out, right? So really crucial. So in closing, I'm just going to talk about, how can you apply these principles of prototyping to your team? The first is prototype early and often, right? So when you think about motion, interactive design now, you want to be able to evaluate those designs in a similar medium. So you want to get out of Sketch, get out of Photoshop, get out of Fireworks, whatever you're using as early as possible and get straight into a prototyping tool so that you can start thinking about what happens when these screens link together. Are there transitions? Are there gesture-based interactions? So on and so forth. And again, prototyping early is crucial because you can get more feedback from your team, your stakeholders, and iterate upon that very rapidly. Second is design with motion. So this is similar to point one, where you now have to think about motion from the start, right? You can make nice wireframes and cool icons and all of that, but if you're not thinking about motion from the start, you're really losing a huge opportunity to provide value to your users. So again, get out of Sketch, get out of Photoshop, and get into a prototyping tool and start iterating there as often as possible. And then finally, to reiterate, is just talk to your users, right? As designers, everything we do is for our users. You can have the sexiest prototype, that pulls in JSON data and flies all over the screen. But if you don't show it to your users, you haven't validated whether or not it's successful, right? You have no way to measure that success. So prototypes really allow you to get your designs in front of your users and evaluate those experiences and validate them and make sure that you're solving a problem and fulfilling a need for your users. And so with that, I'm going to bring Mark on the stage, who's going to do a case study of how we've applied this to designing Lyft flying.
Thanks, Patrick. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the history of Lyft Line and how we improved that experience and how prototyping came into play when doing that. So how many of you were around when we very first launched Lyft Line? OK, many of you, cool. So just to jog your memory, it looked a little different, the first version. And when we set out to design Lyft Line, we wanted it to be as familiar and as easy as possible. So what that meant was making it look basically like the regular Lyft mode. So we have a big green request button down at the bottom. We have a pickup location for you, and the only small addition was this party size indicator. But when you actually tap that request button, what you get is a slightly different experience. It was kind of an unexpected behavior. So because Lyft Line, because you need a destination, we were forcing you to enter that in. So we wanted to, in designing an updated version of this, we're trying to figure out how can we do this, how can we make this experience better and make it sort of more about what's an expected behavior that people might use, but make it just as fun and easy to use as possible. So let me take you back to the future, actually 2013. How many of you remember using a beta version of the app that allowed you to set your drop-off? I know there's a couple of you in here. Yeah. So we actually had this version of the Lyft app that allowed you to set a drop-off. You can see here, it actually looks kind of like what the current Lyft Line experience is like, where you'd hit set pickup, and then you'd get this drop-off step where you could drag your drop-off pin around on the map, and we even had sort of like smart locations for you. We would surface places that you frequently visited, and you could drag that pin onto a target and snap to it. So we wanted to basically bring this concept into the new version of Lyft Line. So you had this like two-step process. Now, I worked on this with our one iOS developer at the time. Now we have many more, Eduardo, to make all these interactions possible. And it was great working with him. There was a lot of hours sitting at his desk with the code and trying out a lot of things. But it was also kind of a tedious process. There was a lot of trial and error that was involved. A lot of trial and error. And so the way it would work is like I had this idea in my head of like what I wanted this interaction to be. Like you drag the map around, you have these like targets that are expanding, and when you snap to one and let go, it does this animation. And so like how can we build this animation? We had to do it in code. We had to test it out. So we had to try a lot of things, try some values, run that in the simulator and see what we got and play around with it. And then, oh, no, that doesn't quite work. I need to like tweak this a little bit. So there's a lot of like back and forth kind of tweaking and iterating over and over again. So in the final version of the app, what ended up being really important was Pixate, because it allowed me to prototype this new version with all these interactions and hand it over to developers, and they could just run with this prototype that I had built for them and know exactly what to code. So we could sort of front load all of that trial and error and experimentation onto the design side and rapidly sort of explore different properties like different easing and different timing and all that stuff. So this is the version of Liftline that we have currently today in the app. And just to jog your memory, this is what happens when you set pickup, and then if you have a home or work set, you can actually drag to those targets on the map. And when you drag and then let go and you're over a target, it snaps to it and does this cool little animation. So I'm actually going to walk you through how I built the original prototype that I handed over to developers to get to this final step. So the interaction, just to sort of like focus our attention on what we're going to look at in Pixate, is just this specific interaction here of what happens when you drag your destination pin over a target. And you can see there's a couple things going on here. It's highlighting. It has a highlight state. And then when you let go, there's like this cool little pulse animation. So that's what we're going to prototype in Pixate. And I've set up some of my layers. So I'll show you how the layers are set up here. So this is what we're going to see in Pixate is we've got our header at the top, and then we have the destination pin just below that, because that's the next sort of highest thing in the hierarchy. And then we have the map at the very bottom, which is sort of going to spill outside of the frame of our Pixate prototype that allows us to drag everything around. And then we've got this map target, which is comprised of a couple different parts. We've got the icon at the top, and then we've got this target background, which we'll be playing around with in Pixate. And then finally we've got a layer at the bottom that's for our pulse animation. And there's sort of 3 steps that we're going to do to build this Pixate prototype. So the first one is just to make the map draggable, and we need to make sure that we organize our layers properly so that everything within that map is moving together. And then the second thing we're going to do is add those states to the target, so the highlight state and the scaling. And then finally, we're going to add our pulse animation. So let's dive into Pixate. So if you guys aren't familiar with Pixate, basically it's got sort of a layer palette on the left-hand side, and you can see that I've already loaded in my layers and assets here, just to speed things up a little bit for the purposes of the demo. And you can see that in the map layer, I've actually sort of put all those things that are moving with the map inside of that map layer. And then at the bottom, we have a bunch of different animations and interactions that we can apply to those layers. On the right-hand side are sort of all the properties that we're going to edit when we're editing a specific layer or a specific interaction. So the first thing that we're going to do here is make the map draggable. So how are we going to do that? Let's click on our map, and it's very simple. We're going to add a drag animation. It's really easy. And there's some properties that you can change with the drag, but we're just going to leave it alone for now. And let's see what happens. So now you can see the map drags around, and all the parts inside of it are moving with the map. But obviously, we don't have any of those fancy animations yet. So the next thing that we're going to do is go in and sort of adjust the scaling of that target, that pink stroked circle with the fill of white. And we'll get that to scale based on our map dragging interaction. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the target. And now the target is currently set to its final size. So we actually need to start it at a smaller scale. So we're going to make it 0.6, what it normally is. And then we're going to actually add a scale animation to scale it back up to its final size as we drag the map. And so this is our scale function. And you can see as I set the drag position, and continuously to final value means that I can continuously drag the map around, and it's going to change based on that. Now we're going to anchor ourselves to the left side of that map. And so we're going to have limits. So we're going to start where the map currently is at negative 210. And then as we move the map over to the left, so it's this minus direction at negative 270, we're going to cause the target to grow. And we're going to scale it up to its original size of 1. Cool. So now let's see what that looks like. There we go. Cool. So you can see now that that target is actually scaling as I drag the map around, and it's scaling this sort of continuously the whole time. So now let's add that highlight state. So once we have the pin sort of enter into the circle, we need to flip the colors. Okay. So in order to do that, we're gonna use an image, which allows us to swap our asset. So that particular object that's there on the map, you can put any asset that you want in there. And same thing, we're setting it to when the map is being dragged. And now we need a threshold. So we need, once that pin reaches a certain x value, so map.x is less than, and we're going to put negative 290. Now, all these values, mind you, are things that I tweaked, and I made a couple different versions to sort of get the values to be exactly what I needed. And then we're going to swap our target asset. And then we need to swap it back to its original asset when the pin moves back outside of the circle. So you have kind of like these two states. And that's built in sort of like an if-then statement here. And we also need to do the same thing for our little icon that's inside of there. So we want to turn that white when we turn the background pink. So I've already sort of preloaded that animation in there. And now let's see what we have. Oops. Went too far. So now you can see that it's actually doing its highlight. It's like inverting the colors as we drag to it. Cool. All right, now we got to get that pulse animation working properly. So let's go back into Pixate. We're going to click on our pulse. And so again, the pulse is at the final size that it's going to be at, so we need to start it at a scale of 0. And then we're going to scale it back up. And this is going to happen when we let go of our drag. So on drag release, we're going to scale the animation to its final size. So this is going to scale up to 1. And then we also need to, and so the easing is really important here. So in order to make that nice sort of light effect, we want to set the easing to be an ease out, and we want to set it to be a pretty dramatic ease out. So that's why I picked Quintic there. And the duration is going to be 0.6 seconds. Now we also need to add a fade animation. So as it grows, we're going to fade it to 0. And right now it's like about half opacity at 50. So it's going to go from 50% alpha to 0. Cool, and we can just leave that at linear as the curve, and we're also going to make that 0.6 seconds long. Cool. So let's see what we got. There we go. Nice little pulsing animation. Now, the one last thing we want to do is shrink the pink target down to a smaller scale. So with that pulse, we're going to shrink our target down to sort of indicate that, yes, this is like locked on to this specific location. Go back into Pixate. And we're going to go back to our target, and we're going to add one final scale animation. And this time, we're going to, again, trigger it when we let go of our drag, so on drag release. And we're going to scale it down to about 0.3 is a good size. So the other thing we need to do, and let's make it a spring just because that's kind of fun. The other thing that we need to do here is fade out that icon that's in the middle of the target to 0. So we don't want that to still be there. So we're just going to get rid of that. Same trigger. When we let go of the drag, we're just going to fade out to 0. And then there's one last final step, which is, so that pulse animation that we were just working with before, we want to give that a little bit of a delay. It just needs 1/10 of a second. But what that allows the user to see is that the target is sort of honing in, and then it's like kind of locking. And again, these are like things that you can play around with at any time to kind of You can even make multiple Pixate prototypes and load them up side by side and see which thing is working best. And this is something that saved us a lot of time in the end of the process. So now let's see what we got, and this should be kind of the final animation that we're going for. So that's kind of it, and you can see this is like very, very high fidelity and detailed. You can get super nuanced with these kinds of animations in Pixate, and it's very easy to do. This took really not that long at all to set up and make. Cool. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Frank to introduce Pixate.
That was amazing. Great stuff, guys. Yeah, so I'm really excited about our next two guest speakers, Paul Colton and Andrew Holt from Pixate. I'm going to let them sort of themselves. And the stage, Paul and Andrew.
All right, can you guys hear me? Okay, good. All right, first a picture of the audience, as always. Well, you never see this vantage point. All right, quick intro. Honestly, I've never seen these slides. Now it makes sense why we're invited. I was like, why does it say Lyft plus Pixate? I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. I mean, seriously, we literally have not seen that. As you guys can imagine, I mean, to see, your own product being created and used like that, I mean, it's awesome. And half the time, even now almost, we look at this stuff and we're like, how do they do that? I mean, that was pretty good, pretty self-explanatory, obviously. But we've actually seen some prototypes and we're like, I don't get it, and we have to go see. So anyway, I just wanted a quick intro. I mean, you heard obviously Paul and Andrew here, and more about the company, just for a minute, and then I'll hand it over. But basically, we started mid 2012, and the interesting, just real short story is as a Y Combinator company. I don't know if you guys remember Combinator. It's kind of this incubator thing, but I think what's interesting is I was kind of in between companies, if you will, and I just happened to hear that they had a new program that was literally the no idea application. I said, hey, that's me. Literally, this is not a joke. I was like, hey, I have no idea, so let's go apply. And they're only accepting very few because obviously no idea, right? What was also interesting just at the time, they're like, look, we really don't, I mean, I'm kind of tooting my own horn, but it's still part of the story. They're like, look, we don't really do single, solo founders. They're really big on co-founders, and it makes sense. Doing a startup is really hard. But again, I was home alone. I was like, oh, crap. All right, so solo, I'm applying by myself with no idea. I mean, literally, it was the longest shot you could ever imagine. And I kid you not, I get the phone call. I'm like, oh, my God, you've got to be kidding me. And anyway, so it was interesting. Another quick little factor was really interesting is they call me a few days before I had to. What you do is you go in and you interview, and you have 10 minutes. That's it. And they call you before, and they're like, by the way, Paul, since you're a no idea guy, like, okay, yeah, whatever, we want you to build something from scratch by that meeting. And it's something you have not done before, and it's something new, and you have to prove us you can do. I was like, what? So, so I actually moved my appointment 1 week later. I had a 1 week window. I was first, so I moved it to the end, and ends up I built just an iOS app, and it was really cool. It was photo stuff, I'm into photography. But so that went well, obviously, and the point of all that is, and I got a co-founder, was from a previous company, and he joined me. He's very technical, so am I, but he was more. And the idea was, we were like, okay, we got in, what are we going to build? So really, obviously, you saw the result of what we built, but I think today, really, we're going to talk about kind of why, what was the reasoning behind some of this, and then, where we're going with it. And I think, anyway, that's obviously very exciting to us, and I wanted to, thank you all for coming, obviously, and go ahead, Andrew.
So guys, I'm the head of product at Pixate. So just going to kick things off just by talking, and Patrick and Mark talked about this, so I'll kind of breeze through it, but really, why does motion matter? Why has it become important in the last few years? There's, we've built Pixate. There's a bunch of other tools that have come out. It all kind of happened, I think, in the last year, like in a really concentrated effort. And really, we've seen, an evolution of expectations on the part of the user, right? Things have become less about visuals and really more how they behave. So we've really moved beyond physical metaphors, and skeuomorphism into how things interact. An ecosystem where things are described by less by how they look and more really by how things are moving together. And there's a lot we can do with motion, and we're kind of being asked also as designers to do more with less, right? We've got smaller screens, we've got wearables coming out, a tiny little screen we have to somehow accomplish, a lot of different interactions on that. We're also being asked to deal with a wider breadth of users, different levels of comfort with what we're building for, different goals. And then we're also designing for shorter engagements. So you have to be able to call a ride with your thumb, in a few seconds on a phone. Obviously, soon we're going to have to be able to maybe do that on a watch. And who knows what the future holds. So as we move forward, motion is really defining the experience. And Patrick mentioned this too. But we can use transitions and animation to communicate with users. It's not just for pizzazz and to make it look sexy. Obviously, that's fun. But we can define hierarchy. We can communicate context as things start to move. And one of the things we want to do is really empower you guys to be able to do that better. So one of the big problems and the reason we started Pixate is building for motion is really complex. And we're not just talking about motion and that two things move from A to B when you tap. It's how many things are choreographed together as they're dragging or as a screen is transitioning. And that's really hard, right? It's really hard to build. And innovation is all about iteration, right? As designers, you need to iterate many times. So if it's complex to build even just one interaction, just to find like one thing that happens when you're swiping or dragging something, how are you expected to build 10 versions of it, throw some of them away, and really come up with the optimal experience? So when we started looking at this problem, and Patrick went through the timeline, but there were only a couple ways to solve this. You could build movies, and they were static, but you could see at least in animation. You could use some complex tools with a really high learning curve, and you could also code. And all these, to us, were just not great ways to create if you're trying to iterate quickly, if you're trying to be visual. And this is what led us to build Pixate. So when we started thinking about this, we came up with a few principles that were really important to us in building this tool. The first one was really a focus on design, not implementation. So it's really about being more declarative instead of imperative, so not having to define exactly how something works in code, but really thinking about how it looks visually. The second principle for us was we want designers to experience everything as the user. So we've built Pixate, and I'll show you how it works in a minute, but it runs natively on your device. You're using all the same APIs that your developer would use, but you're doing all this really easily without diving into code. And then third, we really want to empower, but not influence. So this is probably the biggest challenge for us, was thinking about how do we build a tool that lets a designer build something that's never been thought of before. Like, we can't have thought of it first. You guys are defining these new experiences. So how do we get out of your way, but not influence the ultimate outcome? Not have a prototype or a design and be able to look at it and say, oh, that was built in Pixate. It just looks a certain way. So that was one of the big principles for us. And so we spent about 2 months when we first started diving into this problem, just thinking about the interface and how we solve this. It was a lot of fun. It was also really challenging. But what we ended up with is a visual editor that lets you lay out everything that you're designing, in a medium you're used to, and really make it an infinite canvas, so there's no constraint at all, and be able to combine layers and animations in really novel ways. And obviously you're using images you're bringing in from other tools to define an interface, but really you could use Pixate to define almost anything. You could even build a game with it in theory. And then, as I mentioned, a really important thing for us was native output. Let's not simulate the experience. Let's let you as a designer feel the real thing that previously you would have had to work hand in hand with a developer to see. So that was a really important point for us. So yeah, I want to just give you a tour of how Pixate works, and let's build something together. So this is our interface. Mark just showed you how it works, but I want to just show you how to build something really simple and show how easy it is. So on the right is actually a native device. This is pre-recorded, makes the presentation easier. But that's my phone just coming in through QuickTime on my computer that I recorded. So you're going to see it update in real time as I start to add things to the editor, and that's how Pixate works. So I drag that a layer, the phone's going to refresh, and again, that's just my iPhone 6. You're just seeing the screen of that. Then we have a layer list, so I'll rename the layer. We have a number of interactions that are available that you can add to a layer to make this interactive. So in this case, I can just add drag, and I can just drag it onto the layer itself. And we build automatically a move with drag animation. So now over on the device, as we're swiping around, you can see it's just moving with my finger. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's say we want to put the layer back where it started when I let go. So we also have a number of animations that you can use, and they're all based off an interaction or an event. So in this case, we want to base this move animation off of the logo drag release. So when I lift my finger, let's have it move somewhere. So we'll just have this animate with a duration. That's our only option here. And we're just going to have it move back to the start. So if you look up, I don't know if you guys can all see that, but just look up at the properties. You can see it's at X value of 55, Y of 60, 68. So we'll just put that into the animation, give it a spring easing curve. And now as we drag it around and let go, we can just see it bounces back to where it starts.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty simple. That would have taken us about 20 seconds if we were just doing it.
I just want to add one thing. Is like, I always like, whenever we demo this live, I mean, literally I always take pause, as I'm going to do right now, and we literally are holding this phone. And I know we saw the previous video, and you're seeing this, and you'll see what we're about to show. But for me, it's like I always want to stress, there's this whole short circuit that's happening here, just to be like really to drive it deep, is that we're doing this visually, as you saw, obviously dragging images and layers and adding this stuff, and then that's actual native iOS app running. Anyway, it's a native app running on the device, and that could be an iPad, an iPhone, whatever, and it's the same thing that your developer would write.
Or Android too, yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that, but I was holding that back. And Android. By the way, at the same time, but and as many of them as you like. But the idea is, it literally is the same thing. I just want to stress that because it's so different. I think fundamentally is the approach we took. As I mentioned, I'm an engineer I'm not a designer, but more than design. And I say that because that was a very important goal, as Andrew mentioned, is we wanted absolute, full, 100% fidelity. And I just want to stress that again because it's not almost real. It looks pretty real. Oh my God, it looks like a real app. No, it is a real app, and it is 100%. And I think, as mentioned, it's using all the same APIs that your developers are going to use. And I think it's very empowering, right, as a designer, because you just saw literally, that was real time. By the way, this recording we just did this afternoon, it's not that we fast forwarded. Everything you just saw was real time. That was like, what, 15, 20 seconds. And now you have an app that you could hand to somebody. I'm sure it doesn't do a lot, but it's bouncing around, it's flicking. I'm telling you, if you want to impress somebody, you do this. You just don't tell them how. And So anyway, I make that point. You'll see everything we're about to show, everything you've seen, everything that Lyft's been doing, everything. It's all real, and that, I think, for me, obviously, you can tell it's why it's so exciting. There's no hidden anything in between other than the magic we do to make that happen.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, we stress that it's native, but I mean, really that it doesn't really matter. It's just how it feels and how it looks. And a big job of being a designer is to sell the experience. So we've got a lot of teams we work with that a designer has taken this to like the CEO in the lunch line or something, and if it was just a static mock, if it was something that felt kind of funky, it probably wouldn't work. But the person can take it out, feel it, and they're like, oh, did you build this? And they're like, no, it's a prototype. But it is the exact experience that they want. Every nuance, every detail as a designer, you were able to get that exactly as you wanted and build a really compelling experience. And one of the cool things about being native, right now we have native views, and it doesn't, how it works behind the scenes doesn't really matter, but we can start to give you all the capabilities that a developer would have. If you want to use the camera, if you want to use the keyboard, and we're going to be adding all that stuff. So that was a pretty simple demo, but you can see how we can stack all these together and start to build almost what looks like an actual app. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Tinder. So really, I just set this up as a... I'm married, so I've never used this app before. I don't even know what it is. But so we just added a bunch of animations. This thing on top is just a card like we just created. I just put a screen off to the left. If that's off screen, we'll bring it on screen. You'll see on my device in a second. But really, because there is no limit, I'm just stacking layers on. I can build any interface I want. And so when you load it on device, you'll see it'll load up, download all the assets. And now as we start to drag what was basically like the thing we just built, it's just a card with some conditions. It just looks exactly like the real app. We'll see at the bottom, all the little buttons are scaling.
And the like. And
yeah, I mean, there's probably a few details that we built this afternoon in like 20 minutes, so I didn't do everything, but we're using a real native scroll view to move between the two views. We have the sort of choreography of the Tinder, whatever their logo is at the top, the little flame thing. But we were able to build. I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to tell if I handed this to you, other than some of the buttons don't work, but I could have finished that in an hour, is that it isn't like the real app. It looks exactly the same. But the point is not so much that I was able to just recreate an existing app, but if I were creating this, I could have tried a bunch of different things quickly. I could have tried, what happens to that picture as I drag it off to the left and the right. They fade in the like and the nope, but I could have faded the picture out. I could shrink it down. I could try vertical dragging, and it just felt that those are better experiences. And I could have done all that very quickly and then arrived at an optimal experience. So we just mentioned this too, but one of the cool things about Pixate is you can run it on any iOS or Android device, and you can run many devices looking at the same prototype at once. So if you're in a design review, you can have everyone in the room use their phone, not look at a screen or a video of the thing you built. And the emotional attachment you have to actually using something often can really help sell an idea versus just seeing it on the screen. And another really cool thing is we've just started is we have Android Wear support. So this is actually Pixate running on an LG G Watch with a prototype that I build just like any other prototype for the phone. So it's not a real complicated prototype, but you could go pretty crazy with it. We've got Apple Watch support coming soon. So we don't know how this sector's going to do, but it's really important as a designer to think about how will the experience shrink down. And one of the things we're excited about too is actually letting you prototype both for the watch and the phone at the same time and actually have them communicate. So I think that's going to be one of the interesting cases is when you do something on the watch, what's happening on the phone, and vice versa. So we want to make everything really easy for designers. We don't want people to have to learn to code or really learn a new language. But we have a pretty cool feature that we just released called Actions, and it lets you, if you want to, use script to build repeatable things that would otherwise be kind of tedious. Or in this example here, I actually built just a quick script that's going to let us lay things out in a perfect circle. So I'll just pause briefly. If you're familiar with JavaScript, this is just basically plain JavaScript. It doesn't look very pretty, but I'm just laying stuff out in a perfect circle. I could, in this case, I'm going to have 6 buttons get printed, but I could do 5, I could do 4. I wrote it to be dynamic like that, but it doesn't really have to. But the point is it's just a shortcut to lay something out in a perfect circle as opposed to eyeballing it or doing the math on a calculator myself and then putting stuff in that location. So if I select that layer and run this action, you'll just see we'll generate all the layers immediately, and I actually generated all the animations for it too. So the point isn't really that I scripted something. We're actually trying to avoid that, but sometimes it's easier to bounce out to that, do something quickly, or have someone else do it for you that's familiar with that. So the cool thing about this is I could share this in our community, and hopefully no one ever has to write a circular layout thing again. But with that, we just built, when I tap that, I think it already played through, but when I tap the button, it just plays out a circular menu. Oh, there it goes. So that was really quick and pretty easy. But the idea is we can use actions, and as a team, we can start sharing these. And we also have a cool idea in the works. It's really just taking a prototype and making it a component. So you may have a standard element that you're using in your designs. The team only has to really build that once. And we know some teams that actually have their entire app prototyped, and if you're modifying an onboarding flow or some other new feature, you can start with that base prototype and really almost have the complete app working that you can put in someone's hands, whether it's a user or a stakeholder, and kind of sell the idea.
One thing. Yeah, and just one thing. I think for us, it's we took obviously a different approach in terms of coding because again, as Andrew mentioned, we didn't want you to have to use code to build your prototype. And it's not code running the prototype, right? That's not the idea. The idea is, how can I make the design process easier? Are there any tasks that either I need to repeat a lot, are very tedious, or really one of the best example are computationally intensive or mathematical in nature? Imagine a circle's one, but what if you said, look, I need, for whatever reason, I need something to move on a very certain curve, or some certain, you know what I'm saying? Something you just don't want to eyeball. And the idea is that's what it's about. It's kind of like macros or Adobe Photoshop Actions. The idea is, how do we help you build things quicker, right? And there's just an important distinction in the approach we've taken because, as Andrew said, we really never want to get to the point where we say the only way to do something is to bust out into code. Our ultimate goal is try never to have you code, but we understand that there's some times where it's the fastest way to get something complex done. So anyway, again, that's our approach. And as Andrew mentioned, just to reiterate, the shareability of these is very cool though, because now you could have a common theme, a common menu, even a common color. If you want to have an action that says, look, I'm going to set the color for my company colors regardless of the color you set, you could do that, and that's the idea behind it.
Yeah, and the big goal with that too is just to make it extensible. If someone can think of something that we haven't thought of, you don't have to wait for us to build it into the UI. So I actually wrote actions just to do horizontal and vertical distribution, which is like a button in Sketch. And then someone wrote in is like, why don't you just add that to the UI? And we definitely plan to. But the point is, someone else could have built that before we got around to adding it to the interface. So the way we view the future is really where prototyping is design. I mean, this isn't really a novel concept, but rather than thinking about prototyping as like a distinct phase of design that you bounce out to, it's really just building, the experience for the user. You're starting with thinking about the most important thing for the given level of fidelity that you need. So we actually already have a lot of people who start in Pixate with just colored layers. We just have that by default. You don't have to have any assets, have started thinking about visuals at all. And you can think about really what the experience needs to do. So if you go back to the Tinder example, we could have just started with the colored cards and felt that was even an interface worth exploring. And one of the things we're really excited about, that we're going to be working on a lot, is really letting design teams and product teams and development teams sort of seamlessly work together. We kind of picture the future as the entire team is working as a design-driven product team, so that when you build a prototype, it's easy to hand that to a designer. They may be able to build something that is hard to prototype. It might be very dynamic, that you can then use in future prototypes. So really see it as a two-way street between doing visual design when things need that, when you're building the experience in our tool or other tools, when you need motion, when you need interaction, and then being able to work hand in hand with the developer, not only showing them the prototype so they can see exactly what you meant, but actually giving them usable values in code. And so on that note, we've got something kind of cool in the works that we wanted to show you guys. So you wanted to,
Yeah. No, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't start yet. One thing I wanted to mention too is, I'll just stay here, is really what Andrew said about, I think one, often get asked this, why that, or this, or why you're doing it this way, and blah, blah, blah. The idea is, I think for me anyway, if you distill it down, I know you guys know this, it's like about communication. A lot of people are like, what are you doing? It's all technical, all this cool stuff. But for us, I think if you really break higher and say it's about communication, right? What we saw, Andrew touched on, we talked to, he didn't mention the slides, but we talked to a lot of companies before we started anything. I mean, all of them, from Twitter to everyone else in between, small and large, everyone. And we literally, we heard the same thing over and over and over. Andrew touched on some of those, right? Like, oh, I spent 2 weeks making an After Effects video. I hand that over to engineering, or my product manager, or whatever, and somebody poo-poos the whole idea, and now I'm like, great, there goes that. It happens the other way too, right? Poor engineer gets a design, like, okay, got it, they implement it, they spend their 2 weeks, if you will, shows it to the other end, let's say designer, stakeholder, and they go, nah, I don't like that. I mean, that sucks, right? I mean, that really sucks. And, one we mentioned, but as an engineering side, I like to say that, designers need to iterate a lot, and you want to, right? Every pixel counts. Engineers do not. Just remember that. Do not want to iterate. You want to get it right the first time, right? So think about that disconnect, right? That's a huge disconnect, right? And that was the problem we saw. I mean, seriously, like fundamentally, that's what it came down to. It's like that gap is so wide in everyone we spoke to in terms of like, how do I iterate 1,000 times in a design, but let my developer deal with it once? But how can I also communicate during that process? And that's really, really hard. So that's the beginning of what we're building. What I want to show now is just some of where we're taking some of that. Now, it may not appeal to most of you, but it's still cool nonetheless, as you'll see. And the idea is, how can we start to close that gap, right? How can we start in the, I think if I click, it'll start, right? What you're seeing here, to back up, actually what you're seeing here, by the way, is interesting also, is we also just recently launched a desktop version of the Pixate, basically online version, right? And the idea was, we heard from a lot of companies, frankly, primarily on the security front, I need to be able to build the future of my product without the world potentially being able to see it. So that's what we built this for. But it also has a lot of other cool benefits, as you'll see. One of them, for example, is, we have this online too, but on this one, there are some sample prototypes. So you can say new from sample, so right away you can get a sense of how to do certain things. So this is one of those samples, right? So one of the neat things we've added is, so completely integrated iOS simulator support. We're also working on the Android one. But it's really neat because now on your computer, you can now, you can see what happens, right? You're now prototyping, simulators right there on the spots. Pick your device size. I mentioned once already, but what's really neat is these run on all devices, all at the same time, any size. You can choose to scale it or not. You can have 10,000 people we thought about, we can put up a QR code, by the way, and you guys with our app can scan you can scan the code and get the app. We thought about doing it today, but didn't want to wait for you guys to install it. But you can is the point, right? That's the idea. But this is cool, right? So the first thing is now, on your desktop now, you can run the simulator. So there you go. So there's a prototype running fully native, on the iOS simulator. You can pick any size you want, so on and so forth. So the other cool thing we're working on now, though, is the next step is what if we added this new magic menu here, right? What if you could take that, I feel like I need a black turtleneck, but not yet, next time. No, what if, the idea, well, it's obvious what's gonna happen next, right? But the idea is,
It doesn't work. It's just a menu.
it's just a menu.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's better next time when it works. But no, of course. The idea is, it's really the obvious next step. But it's really cool if you think about it for a minute, even before I show you, is now you're visually prototyping all the stuff you just saw Lyft did, what we, all the stuff you're seeing. And now you can generate not only the real app that you can play with, but now you're going to generate the Objective-C Swift, by the way, or Java on Android, or C# on Xamarin, source code for the entire app. Now, before, I'll go ahead and show it. And the idea is, there's not much to see. You'll see in a second. So we're going to pick Swift, right? And then we're going to say where to save the project. So now, it's almost so effortless that it's too magical. But what happens here is that, right? Like Xcode just opened. You're like, yeah, so what? Well, yeah, Xcode just opened. That's what. And the idea is, you open up this project, and first of all, it's all there. And if anyone's even looked at Xcode, I don't know if you've even played with it, but the idea is the storyboard, like everything about your prototype has been moved over. So, you have what a developer is going to expect, right? At least the beginnings of that. And so it's the storyboard. I think it's some of the source code. Again, you saw we can pick the language. If you're new school or old school, you decide. So it basically takes everything you've done, your animations, your this, your that, and what's really nifty, yes, slight technical, but what's really nifty is that what we generate is 100%, think of it as like pure vanilla source code. There is no runtime, and when I get into the guts of it, how our stuff works, we've got this complex engine that's doing all the magical work to make it all so cool. But we didn't want to stuff an engine in here and some cryptic stuff only to like the developer to go, I have no idea what's happening here because it's pretty nasty stuff. So what we did is we generate at a much higher level only the things that you did in your prototype. So it's very, very nice in that regard. And then what's cool, of course, you literally just hit run in Xcode. It's like crazy even for me to see it. And then there it is. So now the key difference between what you're seeing here and the simulator is that this is obviously the actual Xcode source code running. Now, if you were nuts, you could deploy this to the App Store, right? It'll probably get approved, right? What's more nuts? But that's what's really nifty, right? Is like, you've got the real app. Now, with all that said, that's the demo, right? The idea is, the end goal for us anyway, if it is for whoever uses it, that's great. The end goal is not prototype here, send to Xcode, deploy to the App Store. That is not the goal, even though it can be done. What it really is informing the developer. It's back to my original point I made. It's the communications path between the two. So when you spent that time nuancing the animation, there's still, I'm sure Lyft can tell you, there's still going to be the process now. The developer can play with it full fidelity. But now they're still going to ask you, okay, now how'd you do that? That's pretty cool. Like what's going on? Now you can come back and say, here are the values I used. Let's say a spring animation. That developer may still say, all right, so how do I do this spring? They can go read, but you know what I'm getting at. And the idea is, what this does is, again, it starts to shorten that gap, right? Big time, right? Because now it's like, if you really think about it, it's pretty scary from a designer perspective. Think how scary it is from the developer. Here comes designer, says, here's the prototype, here's the code, I'm done, and walk away, right? And it's like, oh, crap. And by the way, one other thing we say all the time, seriously, when we talk to all these companies is, so many times, I'm sure you guys have been there, you hear, let's say, a designer presents something, developer goes, nope, can't do it. Take too long, forget it. Or even the other way around, right? Developer wants something, frankly, and designer goes, that's too hard, I can't do that either. I can't design, that's too complex. It's usually the other way, by the way, it's the developer complaining. What I mean is talk about empowering. I know we're going to get some haters, right? Is as a designer anyway, you're empowered to the bitter end, right? It's like, don't tell me it can't be done. Here's the source code, right? It's like, yeah, I wrote source code, right? And then the idea is they can choose not to use all of it, by the way, and that's what I'm getting at. That's not the point of this. The point isn't deploy to the App Store. The point is you've now spoken in their language, right? It's like, here's the source. Take what you want, take none of it. By the way, we've heard companies, in the ego, all devs, and everyone has ego, like, I wouldn't touch that source code. They haven't even seen it yet, right? But we say you don't have to, but you can look at it, and you can see what we did, right? Maybe inform you a little bit, save you an hour of time, save you a day, save you a week. You know what I'm saying. And then lastly, to reiterate that point again, it's that cycle I'm talking about. Is now, think about it, I can generate this file 1,000 times. Now you can give that developer, I mean, you wouldn't want to, but you could give them 1,000 versions of this app and send them that big zip file, right? But that's the idea, and it's pretty cool, frankly. Honestly, even from a developer perspective, it's pretty awesome to be able to like get this. Frankly, I don't care about the design from this perspective, and give me what's left. By the way, you can see where this then follows, right? We hear things like, as you guys know, asset generation for the final product. That's a huge nightmare, right? You now have 3 sizes on iOS, infinite sizes on Android. You got new sizes on the watch, infinite sizes on Android Wear. There's rumors of Apple TV at WWDC. You don't get it. You've got a lot of assets to start cutting and exporting. We could automate that too, right? Because the idea is you've designed maybe with vectors or at the optimal asset size. We can know, oh, they're exporting for iPhone, a certain size, will generate all the assets required. So there's a lot of that really cool value add that can come after. So anyway, I could obviously keep going, but it's really neat. And again, this is really early beta. We wanted it, no one's seen it yet. We wanted to show you guys first. We're going to try to get this out literally as kind of like crazy early beta just because we want the feedback. For example, real quick, I know some people would rather not get a full project, but let's say you built an animation. Imagine if you could right-click a layer and say, export me just that animation as code. A lot of devs, they know how to build an app. They just want to know what are the nuanced motions and interactions that you intended here, so I don't have to try to figure this out. So there you go. All right. So to recap, I think it's obviously kind of clear. I want to touch on a few points, but I think for us, we're trying to go toward the world where maybe prototyping as a word, frankly, is not even used. It's almost a dirty word for us because, frankly, for us, it lumps us into a group that we don't necessarily want to be in. Because for us, it's more about design, and it is part of the design process. The other thing I like to, where we're thinking, for example, about the future is, and I know it doesn't for all of you, but traditionally, does design always have to start, let's say, at the pencil and paper, then maybe go into Sketch or Photoshop, then you go, let's say, into Pixate, and you make it a little bit real, then maybe you hand it to your developer, and then he makes it real. Wouldn't it be interesting to maybe start in the middle, right? Well, what if you blocked and tackled out, and kind of roughed out what the interaction might be you're thinking about, and then instead of importing sketch files, what if you exported a sketch file, right? What if you then said, I know roughly what my interaction needs to be, like I have a map and I've got these pins, but now let me export a file that you, the designer, can start playing with and really optimize, but they're linked, and that's the idea we'd like to go to, where as changes are made in the design time, they're also updated all the way up and down that cycle. Imagine all the way to the developer. He runs the app, next time the asset's been changed on him, right? And it looks better, right? That's kind of where we'd like to go, where everything we're talking about is just part of the whole process. It shouldn't be isolated, I don't think. I think it should be, it's just part of the process, right? And that's our goal, by the way. Our big vision slides, we have like 20 more one other day, it's really about how can we streamline, as I said, the entire flow. And then the really hard part is, can we start to try to make that, frankly, round-trippable? That gets really hard, by the way. But how does a developer maybe say, I'd maybe rather implement it this way? How can that inform you, the designer, to say, okay, I see the limitations this individual ran into. How can I now design around them, but not break the chain between these two people? I think that is the last slide. So
Last slide.
all right, that's it.
I'm going to just repeat the questions that come through. I'm just kind of here for decoration. Any questions out there? Burning questions for the panel speakers. Hang. So the role of high fidelity versus low fidelity and how you leverage those as tools. You want to take this, Mark?
Yeah. So, I mean, other people can definitely chime in, but I think in the past, low fidelity works really well when, like you said, you're trying to like express a concept. But like for us as like designers, I think we tend to get bogged down in like the details and the finer points. And when you're doing user experience, a lot of times the users get bogged down in details or finer points you actually don't want them to pay attention to. And so if you actually don't have the prototype at a high fidelity, they may get stuck in certain places. So I think like more and more it's becoming valuable to just like have high fidelity as often as you can. And if that prototype is still communicating that same like big picture kind of idea, people will kind of actually ignore the details. Like we've like done some color testing in the past, and like people don't even like pay attention to the difference between two different colors. So like the more believable an experience you can provide to your users, the better kinds of feedback you're going to be able to get from them. And just like Patrick was showing with the look back prototypes, like you can actually see the reactions, and you're seeing the reaction to like a real thing that it feels real, and it's kind of like a holistic experience. And so with these prototyping tools, because it's so much quicker to build them, I think it's just all the more valuable to do it in high fidelity.
I think I'll add like one thing about like lower fidelity. I think what was nice about that is you could do it quick and dirty, right? You could sketch things out. You can get you could validate some general concepts really easily. But with these new tools that are available today, you can kind of do that quick and dirty as well, but at a higher fidelity.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I agree. It's like, what if the high fidelity is the low fidelity, right? But from a tooling perspective, I'll just add, it is why, for us, like when you add a new layer, it's just a color. It's actually gray boxes by default. Frankly, that gets old real quick. You want the high fidelity because it's just more engaging. But to that point, though, that is why we did that. The idea is, if you want to say, look, all I'm really focusing on is some basic interaction, let me not even worry about assets. I can literally drag out color boxes. I can put some color on them just so I can see where they are, and that's it. And you can stop there. Clearly, if you present that to anyone, though, they're like, what the heck is this, right? Because as we all know, it's the fidelity that informs what they need to do. We found even when we do it, you put a bunch of boxes in there, even if it's the entire app completed, without the asset, you have no idea what's next. But anyway, that's our tooling approach anyway to that.
Thanks. Maroon sweater. Yeah. Yes, you, sir. Oh, who do we test with? Right, new users or existing users. And how do we recruit for them? Yeah.
Yeah, so at Lyft, we do user testing almost weekly right now. So we have a weekly cadence where we bring in existing users, so passengers or drivers already on our platform. And then we also source new candidates as well. So people who haven't used ride-sharing apps, or maybe we're looking for people that have used competitors' apps. So we do test kind of that full gamut of users. But right now we have a process in place where we do user testing weekly. We have a schedule, so the designer has to get on the schedule if they want to show some work there. We write scripts for the user testing. So we have a pretty built-in process right now to get feedback as early as possible.
We work with our data science team to pull lists of existing users. So if we're targeting a specific profile, then they could help us pull those emails. If they're non-users, then we have to do something like Craigslist and then pair that with like a screener and then go from there. Yeah.
And a shout out to Vicky Tan, who I don't know if where can you raise your hand? Is she here?
She's the one who yelled at everybody.
Yeah. So she's been kind of like spearheading our user research efforts. So if you want to like learn more about that, go talk to her.
We're also hiring a user researcher, so if any of you guys know a good candidate, shoot me a message on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the things with actions that we built is that you can share those, if you're inclined to use those. We're also working on something, we haven't figured out the name, but it's roughly going to be like components. So if you built like a really cool menu, or you built something like a sticky nav that's creative, you can share that if you want to publicly, and anyone would be able to grab that, drop it into their prototype, and use it, as part of the experience. So it's not really open sourcing any like code or anything, but it's just, we definitely want to build a community where if people are inclined to build something and share it publicly, they can. And obviously that's really valuable to a lot of people. It's also a great way as a designer to get noticed, like if you're building something really cool. So we want to make it easy to get that stuff on Dribbble if you want to do that, and then also have our own gallery where you can actually pull those things down, whether it's an action or a component or a whole prototype that you want to start with. And then I think just going forward, how do we harness community and make it really fun and easy to build things that have already been built? So does that answer your question, kind of? Okay, cool.
Angus.
How does using Pixate or prototyping change the product?
So the question is, how do these tools change the dynamic in the product development process as you're working cross-functionally with your cross-functional peers? You want to take this, Patrick?
Yeah, so I can tell a story. So I made a Pixate prototype of something I was working on, and I saw one of my iOS developers in the lunch line, and I said, hey, check this thing out. And he was like, oh, shit. Like, did you build that? Like, is that real? I've never seen a designer before that builds the whole thing. So he thought it was a real app, right? And I was like, no, dude, I know you're new here, but this is a tool called Pixate. And so really now Pixate's been a term just around the office between engineers and designers. And we, like I mentioned in my presentation, we really use these as artifacts for shipping actual design. So no longer does a developer have to sit around and sift through documentation to figure out what we're talking about. We just point them to the Pixate prototype, they pull it up on their own device and work through it that way, side by side. And then I think just allowing us to iterate a little bit more quickly, I think has been really awesome in terms of having less back and forth between engineers, because a lot of times during implementation, a designer might think of like, oh, I missed this one thing. Can you get that in there? And I think being able to create a prototype quickly really allows you to communicate that in a short amount of time, and then they can just make a call, yes or no. So really, I think it's helped us a lot at Lyft.
Yeah.
Totally. So kind of like as Paul mentioned, it's a communication tool for us. So we'll bring that to the developer, show it to them and say, hey, can you build this? They'll take a look at it. They'll try to spec it out and figure out how to build it. We kind of go from there. So it becomes more of a conversation piece. But again, it's something that's a lot more real and live that they can play with and understand a little bit better. So it's definitely like very side by side.
Just want to add one point. Our head designer, Justin, couldn't make it today, but he brought up an interesting point recently. You just sparked it. It's interesting that we were talking about like game companies, and why is it that the designers, let's say, of the 3D models can hand that finished asset, if you will, or artifact, and literally run it directly in the game? I mean, like that model that designer, let's say, worked on is the model that's in the game, maybe a lighter version of it, but it is the same artifact. And I think that is one of the big things that's also missing, right, in the current state of things, right? It's like you said, you really hit this wall. And it's like, okay, again, you're back to, I'm looking at what you intended, but now I have to start over. And I think that's, again, from our side, those are things we want to facilitate, where not only, right, the collaborative sitting down together, but soon the sharing of these artifacts in a way that they don't have to be reproduced anymore. And ultimately it comes down to data, right? But it's very interesting, right? And I think that's where I think a lot of this stuff is further behind things like game and game companies. They have a huge advantage in that regard.
Cool. Plaid. Yeah. Right. So the question was around Watch UI, Watch UX, and what are our plans and to support and design for these devices, and from each of the companies. Okay, well, yeah, well, we do have an Android Wear app out in the wild. We were a launch partner at I/O last year, and there's some users out there. I think we're waiting for the adoption to pick up steam, and it's something that we are still supporting. And while we don't have an Apple Watch app yet, I think we want to see what the adoption is going to look like before we invest the time and resources into it. But it's definitely an interesting use case that we're for sure keeping a close eye on. Yeah.
You can add something. I do want to add some opinions about that. Agreed, no one knows what's going to happen next year. I will say this year will be very successful, right? Who knows what happens next year? It'll be very important this year, right? If you're not on the watch, like, you're old school, or something's not right with you. But next year, you're either going to be really right or really, really wrong. With that said, though, I think there's a few things that are very interesting, specifically Apple Watch. Okay, the interesting about Android is, as you saw in our video, the Android Wear watches is basically the whole Android on there. So that's good and bad. I mean, what's really cool for us is our entire engine runs on a watch. I mean, that's awesome in terms of prototyping. Apple Watch is very, very, very different. That's why we don't have a demo for it yet, is because it's a whole different paradigm. My main point I want to touch on, though, I'm glad you asked the question, is two things. One is, as a designer, which I'm not, but you are, is you have a lot less flexibility. Way, way less. I mean, right? For example, like we know that the glance screen, the very first screen you're going to see, you can't even control the font, right? And then it gets a little better as you go a little deeper. But forget the days of picking your color and font, and that's over, right? On the main screen, you know what I'm saying? And so that's a big deal if you think about it. Right now, you're like, oh man, not only it was hard enough when I went from PC to phone. Now I got to go to this thing, and now I'm limited in font, colors, and interaction, right? So what does that say to me is, man, everything we talked about is even more important. It's not going to be about the color pixel. It's going to be how fast can I get in and out of this device, and is everything crystal clear about what's happening, right? The other thing I think is really interesting as an aside is we have to think about motion beyond what we know today. The big first step, as you're already seeing, is the haptic feedback, right? I think that's really, really cool stuff, right? How many of you are already designing? I'm going to guess the answer is not many. With haptic feedback in mind, right? So when the user is in a certain area of the screen or interface, I'm going to physically respond to the user. Think about, if you don't know, like iMovie, Apple just released an update to iMovie for their new Force Touch trackpad on the new MacBook Pro 13. Why do I know all that? But the point is, as you scrub the video, when you hit the end of the video, you get feedback. Right? When you go over certain menu items or buttons, whatever, you get feedback. I mean, that's huge, right? I think that's a big opportunity for us at Pixate. So it's super cool because we'll be able to, how you can drag out a drag or a motion. Imagine now you drag out haptic feedback, right? And now you say, on what event do you want to trigger this feedback? And it's starting on the laptops. It's already on the watch. That's the reference there. And I think it's also coming to your phones and tablets. So I think that's really the thing to think about is, pixels get less important, interaction gets way more important, and then physical feedback and communication beyond what you can see is also super, super important. So I think that's a big change, right? And honestly, it's something to really think about if I were a designer, because as a coder, I can just code all day, whatever they throw at me. But as a designer, it's like, it is a big change. At least how I see it, it's like, there's a lot of changes coming, and that's why, I know I'm going off now, but like the skeuomorphic stuff, right? Everyone's so focused on what color and grain texture is my button going to be, right? And all of a sudden, overnight, that was over. Not only was it over, but if your app still looked that way, like old school again, right? I mean, I think the same thing's going to happen, if you will, as during the transition to wearables, basically, is all the stuff I just said.
Like focusing on the use case versus like the visual presentation. Yeah, you in the black. So the question was, how does it change the process, the product design, product development process, tools like incorporating tools like Pixate and other prototyping tools, and then as far as team capability, is everybody up to speed on it? Mark, you want to take that?
Yeah. So in terms of like the process, we're always like trying to learn all the latest tools that we can, and so like we recently moved basically everyone over to Sketch from Illustrator. I've been a long time user of Illustrator, and like as soon as Sketch came out, now I've been using it. Like completely abandoned Illustrator. I try not to touch it. I try not to open it if I can. And so like same way with with prototyping tools, like, we're just trying to all kind of learn these things together and share the knowledge as much as we can. And so we're trying to like get everyone on the team up to speed with Pixate. And in terms of like, how we design, historically it's been like, you design something in Sketch and then you export those assets and then pull them into Pixate. But even like, just within the past month or two, we found ourselves more and more like going back and forth from Pixate, like thinking with prototyping in mind, like right from the get-go. And so like our goal is actually just to have prototypes of like any new feature that we're working on. Like it should always include like that prototype component to it.
Our developer and our engineering and product partners, they ask for the Pixate. They say, the Pixate, where's the Pixate? So they ask for it by name. So that kind of in and of itself kind of, that's the writing on the wall for us. It's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think, ease of use is something we're really focused on. I think one of the challenges is if you haven't actually done animation and motion before, there's already a learning curve in what should you even do. I think community can help with that, and obviously talking to others. And then the tool itself, we're constantly working on trying to make it really easy. As we said, we don't want you to have to think about how to accomplish the thing you're doing. You should just be able to just do it, right, and then see if it's worth taking it further. And we've always also got a really awesome support team. So if you do get lost, we are like really responsive. So don't be afraid to send us an email and say, I can't figure this out.
Call us out by name now, so now we'll know.
Yeah.
Start with this.
So that's a great question. The first, like I mentioned, the first 2 months, we sat down and designed a bunch of interfaces, and then we came up with, and basically should it be event-based? Should it be layer-based? How do we do this? I think often we drive ourselves off use cases, so we look at apps that are coming out, if not for everything, but look at what's being done and whether you can do it very easily in Pixate or not. And then really just break it down to all the different elements. So the animations we have now were a result, in the beginning, we looked at the app Jelly. If any of you saw our beta video, that's what we're using. We literally looked at that for like 2 months, and we're like, how do we make this possible? Everything it's doing, rotating as you drag, snapping back on release. So we kind of broke it down to just some elemental animations, which is what we have now. Usually it starts with myself or Justin and Paul kind of just thinking about what how do we extract like an animation or something from this. And when we wireframe it up, we don't use Pixate to design Pixate, the interface. And we have started using it, I think the mobile app, which has animation in it, we've started using it more for that. And we don't have a lot of really like crazy animation in the tool itself. I think for good reason too, because it might get old pretty fast. But no, I think it's a very challenging thing. Like I said, we're trying to design a tool for you guys to build something that no one's thought of before. So we have to always think about how do we build something that's generic, that can be used across any app, and isn't specific to like one use case, like dragging a slider or a snapping behavior. So yeah, there's no specific design process. It's often whiteboarding, just thinking about all the use cases that we have to solve for in a specific thing. They can get pretty tedious, just like all the different things that we have to do. But it's a lot of fun. We enjoyed building it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, cool.
Yeah, just add we looked at a lot of other tools, After Effects, of course, and Motion, Apple Motion, and everything. And one thing obviously you'll notice, it'll come. But for example, notice that Pixate has no timeline. Right, that was by design because what we realized, and by the way, that's what makes it a little bit harder to learn. It's a different. The way I like to look at it is all these tools put time as the most important thing. It's the thing that drives everything. Well, as we all know, that is absolutely not the case when it comes to your mobile app and user interaction. The driving force is the user. So how do you build, right? That was our challenge. How do you build a UI whose main input is something outside of the UI? It's not time at all. It's the user's finger, basically. And not only that, you can't control what they do. So if they're going forward and then let go, maybe a timeline could say, well, let's keyframe that and then keep going. But what if they decide to go the other way? What if they drop 3 fingers down? When, you know what I'm saying? So that fundamentally, we scrapped, he didn't mention, we spent many months coming up with the first, how we're going to build it, and we completely deleted it. Started from scratch because as we got further, right, as we were trying to build the Jelly and similar apps, we couldn't. Or it got too hard. We're like, oh, crap. So we had to delete and we started over. It's like, what is a better model that puts interaction first? Anyway, so what we have is where we, what we landed on for now, but clearly I know one of our goals is how do we continue to make that easy? And I think everyone knows one of the hardest things to do is to make something simple. We all know people underestimate that. And that's frankly our challenge every single day is how do we even do what we already support easier and easier and easier every time before we add new features? You know what I'm saying? So that's what.
Cool. Maybe a couple more. Yep. Yeah, the question was, is there a plan to sort of get in front of the student audience?
Yeah, so we actually, so Pixate, the online version is completely free for students. Or, well, I guess it was. We have a free version now, but if you're a teacher or part of a classroom, we will give you Pixate Premium for free. So yeah, for sure. I think if you're a student, we'd love for everyone to use it. We just actually talked today about doing an academic license for Studio, which now has a perpetual license, or you get with a subscription. So we're definitely going to do that too. Yeah, and we'd love for students to use this. And obviously give us feedback and use it in classrooms. And I think we've seen a bunch of professors already using it in like design schools and stuff with their entire classroom. Some pretty cool stuff that's come out of that. So we'd love to see more of that. Yeah. Yeah, so pretty close to the top of the roadmap is animated GIF support, video support, audio support. With I think we'll start out with pretty basic, like probably not scrubbing, but we'll do start, stop, pause, amount you want to loop a GIF. Yeah, streaming too. So that's one of the interesting things for us is with like video support. There might be videos that are part of your interface that would ship with the app, like an onboarding screen that's just kind of playing in the background. And obviously there's videos that would be user generated. It's an interesting challenge for us just because those don't really need to load with the prototype, and it's actually something a designer would have to think about. Like when someone's scrolling really fast, they may not have the content there yet. Should it fade in? Should it just be like an empty gray box? But yeah, and the other cool thing obviously is if you have like a really complex animation, like it has particle effects or something, like when you tap, we'd obviously love for you to bring that in as an animated GIF. We probably won't get around to tooling stuff like that for a long time. But yeah, that's like, I think like 5th on the roadmap. It's not that far down. So I think in the next couple of months, we'd love to get it in there.
That's it, guys. My batteries.
Thank you so much for coming, participating in the conversation. To Andrew and Paul, Mark and Patrick, thank you so much. I think the conversation was very rich, really informative. I hope you all agree. And love to do this again in the not too distant future. So thank you so much to all the speakers, all of you for coming. You really made this our first event here, a design event here, like really special. So thank you very much.